but we're gonna get started right now. Next slide, please. All right, event guidelines. So this video will be recorded. The event will be recorded. You will not appear on the video. The event is going to be mute courtesy. Your audio will be muted during the event. If you have questions, submit your questions in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Very, very important. If you're putting questions in chat, we will not be able to see them. We look at the Q&A section to be able to answer those questions. So just calling that out. And closed captioning is available. To turn it on, just click on the live transcription icon at the bottom of your screen and select that as your preference. All right, next slide. All right, a quick outline of our agenda. We're going to do a quick round of introductions. We're going to share some tech updates. They're going to cover some general technology updates that I'll be speaking to, metrics that Justin will be speaking to, and hackathon that Alex will be speaking to. Now, we're going to first start off with the introduction. So we're going to do that. I'm Rajib Ahmed. I'm the CTO and CPO here at Meetup. I joined in October of 2020. Very technical background, love building product. I love our mission of connecting people. And I'm very excited to be doing this session. I'll pass it over to Justin to introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Justin Lucente. I started about 4 months after Rajib in early 2021, share a similar technical background and love for building things around user-facing products and community. Alex, on to you.
Hello, my name is Alex Garrison. I'm an engineering manager here at Meetup on the member experience team. I have been here for about a year, and it's a great company built around community, and it's everything I want.
All right, great. All right, I'm going to be kicking it off. So the first thing I just want to mention is that the engineering updates or tech updates that we're going to be talking about is really focused on how we're running our department and how we actually execute. So it will not focus on product and product features, but more on the technical side of things. So, but that being said, we will be having another session with the product update in a few weeks, and we look forward to sharing more on our roadmap from a product and feature perspective there. But on the next slide, we'll just share from our focus what it has been in the previous year and this year, which is the 3 big S's. The first one is for speed, which is performance across our different platform, whether it's apps, whether it's our APIs, whether it's our website. The next part is scale, which is really we want to make sure our platform scales as our demand increases globally. We are over 194 countries, and we want to make sure that it is fast for everyone and it is able to scale as our business is growing. And the last one is also, of course, security. You know, we want to always protect our data. On the next slide, I'll just touch on these a little bit. All right, so speed. You know, we are continue to expand our platform and bring modern technologies here. Our technology is built on Next.js and React, and our APIs are built off of GraphQL. And we're continuing to push speed as a focus that we're going to continue on Q3 and Q4. I'll touch this in a bit in the next few slides. Again, I think availability and reliability from a scalability is what we want to focus on. We've started doing some things for multi-region, and I'll share what we've done and what we're going to do in Q3 and Q4. And in 2022, Q3, Q4, the last thing I would want to say is that security, accessibility, compliance, and business continuity are deep focuses that we have. I'll share some updates of how far we've come and some things that we're doing. Right, next slide. All right, so look, we know that speed is really, really important. In 2021, it was a major focus as we shifted from tech depth into modern platforms. Well, right now, 90% of our traffic being served is via platforms that are made of React and Next.js, and we're very, very excited about this because the experience, the speed, and a lot of the technical challenges that we would have on our previous platform are now no longer here. We're 3x faster than all of our competitors, and we're continuing to keep our eyes on this. From our APIs perspective, we make sure that speed is top of mind. We're at 200 milliseconds, and we're aiming for this to get to lower and lower each quarter. In Q3 and Q4, one of the big focuses is going to be to take that remaining 10% and really move them over to our platform. Now, that is, those 10% have a lot of pages. They're not heavily used. So we're going to try to re-platform the ones that make sense. And for other areas, we're going to move them as is, but there'll be a more modern experience and mobile friendly, of course. We also are going to be looking at caching and acceleration. What that means is we know our pages are fast, but we know they could be even faster. So we're having smart caching architecture that we're actually deploying now to be able to help shape this. And the last one is continued web and app optimizations. We know we can do more on the client side, and we're taking advantage of things that we can do on the mobile apps and the web page and our website that we can do in Q3 and Q4. Next slide. So scale, again, coming and touching on to improving reliability and availability globally. In Q1 and Q2, what we really did is we recognized that in order to scale our infrastructure globally, that we needed to go across more regions across the globe. So we know that our websites currently today are already across multiple regions. What we wanted to do is take our APIs, take our database, which is RDS on AWS, and our NoSQL databases, and also scale these out. So this actually moves into a smarter business continuity plan where we're going to be up all the time. It's safer for our releases. It just enables better management. And at the end of the day, for our members, if you're in Australia or you're in Ireland or you're in Asia, you're going to be connecting to data centers that are essentially hosted by AWS that are closer to you, which means the performance is going to be ultimately more reliant and it's going to be quicker as well. So scale, some speed benefits there, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we continue to expand because our global audience is increasing all the time. And at the same time, we will be scaling down, which means all the legacy things that we actually have reduced our footprint on, we're going to take steps to cycle them off and shift away from unsupported infrastructure, because a lot of the infrastructure we did have in the past were very old. We retired, we moved, we stabilized, but now it's time to retire some of those infrastructure. And the last part that I'll be talking to you on the next slide is around security. All right, so here we're going to just keep a major focus on protecting our members and their data. I think we've executed a lot of things related to data erasure and compliance already, but in Q3, Q4, we're going to continue on that and accelerate some of the efforts. Again, we want to make it super easy for data erasure needs that any of our members have to be easily take that off, from simple requests on our web and mobile platforms. GDPR is, of course, something that we're already doing and continuing to have a focus on. Our trust and safety team, which is a wonderful team, it's continuing to always make sure we don't have spam on our websites and platforms, and make sure that we have healthy events and organizations meeting up in a good and safe mechanism. We're going to have our penetration test, which is going to be done, followed by remediations. Again, we're doing really, really well here. We do this annually, and we're in a very, very great state, but we always want to keep testing, as we know that there could be new vulnerabilities that come out at any moment. And as well as accessibility, it's going to be a continued focus, along with many, many internal and external audits that we do, which then also have remediations. So I wanted to pause here, but this was a lot of the things that we're going to be doing in Q3 and Q4 from a engineering and tech team perspective. There's a lot of product work that we will have, and again, just highlighting that's going to be discussed in a different Meetup Live. But I want to now hand it over to Justin, who's going to talk about metrics and how we use that today.
Thanks, Rajib. So metrics, user feedback, and prototypes are three groups of data which we use to inform what we work on. Of course, we have our own ideas, but we have to be aware of what the data is saying, and more importantly, what our users are saying. I'll be touching a bit on each of these three things. Next slide, please. I wanted to take us through a bit of a view of what we look at when we talk about metrics. You've probably heard many iterations of let the data decide. Well, what does that actually mean for us? Next, please. So you've heard us talk about page speed, so I won't dig in too much there. Rajib's covered that quite a bit. But what do we look at, and why does that actually matter? Two main segments of speed for us are the overall page load, which is what the customer actually sees right in front of them, and behind the scenes, the API requests. That top chart on the right is indicating page load over time. You can see that we have a mixture of good, needs improvement, and poor. We monitor this to see where the trends change. For example, one way we would use this quite frequently is you could see that in early May, there was a spike in the errors. We accidentally hurt our page speed. We weren't sure why, but with this metric, we had a date in which we could dig in. We were able to see the timing and the trend change and pinpoint what we did and resolve that issue. And then you can see later on in early June, we brought it back to acceptable levels. The second chart on the bottom there is showing API request speed averages. Think of this as how long the data itself can be pulled into our pages. We would use a chart like this to see that the first one listed, it's kind of hard to read, but trust me on this, had a really slow time of 10.5 seconds. That's really slow. That's so unusual. We would have to look at it to see what was going on, was something broken, and that becomes the target for the day if we saw this pop up in an alert. Next slide, please. So there's a lot to digest here. Pop quiz, what is this? If you could guess, I'd be very surprised. This is the Meetup homepage. However, it is the view of the Meetup homepage from a browser. And this is all of the data that the browser is actually parsing to say, what do I do with this page? How do I display it? It's extremely busy. And it's the type of view we might look at when we're trying to diagnose what's going on with different kinds of slowness. For example, there can be certain types of JavaScript which would accidentally make the page hang and take a long time for the user to be able to interact with it. There can be network requests, both from us or from some partners, which are having issues causing delays. So we would dig in on something like this in order to find out what's our course of action. What do we have to fix? What do we have to replace? Next slide, please. Another main category of errors, of metrics is errors in the variety of server side, client side, and from the APIs. On the right side, for example, we could use that type of chart to monitor if our request volume dropped suddenly, if our overall service had blips of slowness as indicated by those peaks, or even if we had too much CPU usage. All of these things could indicate something related to a release with an unknown error or some sort of change in our environment, which we have to take immediate action on. On the bottom left, that one's specific to API errors. You can see the first item actually says, this is real by the way, it actually says 100% error rate. That's a pretty good indicator that we forgot to clean something up or something is dramatically broken. A lot of these things are automatically triggering alerts to our engineering team so we can resolve and keep the site running. In the end, we measure, monitor, and take action on all of this in order to keep the site as healthy as possible. Next slide, please. So another related thing to metrics is split testing of a different variety of metrics. So split testing or A/B testing is a way which we can determine which test or experiment that we're trying wins out. For example, we may have a control version and a variation. We're just trying something out on the site. It could be a design. It could be something related to data. It could be something related to user interface. We actually measure which one our users like more. That can be from how much they've interacted with it. Did they interact with it at all? Was the interaction very lengthy or short? There's all sorts of things we can get from this. This allows us to know when to keep digging into an idea or even when to abandon it. And we've actually done that. We've seen users not particularly like something, and then we would go a different direction. Some of you may be very familiar with this, even if you don't realize it. We launched a big revision to our homepage about a year ago. We saw literal metrics indicating that our users didn't like it as much. We made drastic changes, even removed some of the features, and wound up re-releasing the latest version, due in part to the impact of split testing. Users made an impact just by using or even not using our features. Next slide, please. So another busy graphic here. A metric we care a lot about is SEO. And SEO it basically indicates how easily can a user be in Google and find exactly what they would like to find in a quick and efficient way. One of the ways we can do that is related to speed as we always mention, and that can greatly impact how fast Google is able to ingest our content and make it available to be searched for. However, how does it know what our content is? So you can see on the right there, what this is indicating, there's something called schema data. Schema data is a way where you can add code to your pages to be very explicit to search engines and say exactly what this is. We are not just showing a website that says the very latest from Meetup Engineering. It's literally coded as an event with a specific name, a description, the date, where it's located. It knows that it's an online event. It knows which specific piece of content is the image. And this is used by places like Google, and they cater to specific event search interfaces, and they can craft something based upon the specific data that we feed into it. So it doesn't have to take a guess. We tell it explicitly by using what's called schema data. Next slide, please. So this is about search, and even on search, we have metrics. We measure things like trends that people are searching for, the relevancy, successful results. This can be used in a way where somebody does a search, does not find a result they're looking for, performs another search, perhaps another. We have metrics on that, and that's a big indicator that we've missed something. We have ways where we can tune our algorithms to deliver more relevant search results. So we look at things like this in order to say, did the user find what they're looking for? Were they able to take action after a search? Were they able to find the search interface? Sometimes this is related to UI, sometimes it's related to data. It's a continual process, and we always try to train our models so that we're providing the most relevant items. Some of it's from the data team, but a lot of it does fall on engineering and design as well. It's a very cross-cutting effort, and it's continuing. Next slide, please. So now a little bit about feedback. In order for Meetup to know what to focus on, we can't just rely on our automated metrics as we've been discussing. We need to know what our actual members, organizers, and even non-members are thinking. The only way to do that is to talk to them and get their feedback on our products. Next, please. We use a variety of methods, including interviews with actual users, focus surveys around a particular topic, and testing sessions where we have the user try out a new product idea or give feedback on a design change. For example, we may have a session where we ask, how do you find new groups or events on Meetup? We would then let them drive and see what happens. Sometimes people do exactly what we intended and sometimes not. This is how we learn and get information to guide us when we start to build and improve the actual features. The goal is to learn how they use it organically and if they can understand the product. Another example is how we completed a couple of rounds of user interviews this past quarter to understand how we could support new organizers better. We need this input, and it's an important process which will continue into the future. Along the same lines, next slide. Thank you. Along the same lines, but initiated by the users instead of by us, are app ratings and surveys, and feedback from our customer support team. Next slide. For example, this is an actual 3-star review that we got from the iOS member app. They like that they can find things to do, but wish the ordering of the listings had more options. In their own words, having the option to filter a specific day is good, but adding a filter for the listing to appear in order based on time of event would be great. This is real feedback said by an actual person who cared enough to get in touch with us. This greatly helps us learn more about where we can improve or where we haven't made something easily used within the app. Whether it be 5 stars, 3 stars, 1 stars, we get all of them, and we do read them, and we do try to take action whenever we can. Next slide, please. We also get feedback direct to our customer support team. They gather it and report this internally so we can see trends. For example, this is showing that the largest feedback or product suggestion was related to events, with Meetup Pro and messaging tied for a distant second. We can then dig into the details and read more about the specific input. If most of the feedback is about events, what are they saying? How can we get it to a point where we minimize that portion of the pie chart? All of these forms of feedback help us on our path toward creating an experience that will help our community now and in the future. Now I'll hand it over to Alex to learn more about how we can prototype features at Meetup.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alex Garrison. The big question is, how do we get new ideas and customer feedback into our product when it wasn't specifically roadmapped after we received this feedback? We hack. This past quarter, we had our first virtual hackathon since the start of the pandemic. For those who may not be familiar with what a hackathon is, simply put, it's a social coding event that brings software developers together to improve upon or build out new things. Hackathons are a great way for us as a team to discover and quickly proof out new features for the product. Outside of quickly proofing out new features, what other reasons would we want to hack? Hackathons let us get creative with how and what we implement in our product, with the ultimate goal being a better Meetup. It allows time out of the normal busy quarter to ideate and collaborate with team members who normally might not get to work with, which helps bring in a fresh perspective and really drive the creative flow. And finally, and most importantly, it's fun. How we hack. We had some ground rules that were backed by some of our company values with this hackathon iteration. Normally, hackathons are just engineers, but we included folks from across the entire organization to get great balance of skills and multiple perspectives. We pulled in product, designers, customer support, and pretty much everyone who wanted to be involved to help build our teams. And then how does this reflect our company values? Well, Meetup believes in working together as a community, and we use that to our advantage to build some great demos, as well as forging new relationships with people that we may normally not have the opportunity to work with. And now on to some more specific details. Where do we get our ideas? As Justin mentioned earlier, we relied heavily on customer feedback, product research, and customer surveys. From these sources, we actually generated a list of ideas that teams went through and picked from. And how did it go? Well, our developers had a great time and really came up with some awesome solutions. We ended up with 6 working demos and proof of concepts after only 2 days of work. And that's 6 from 6 teams. And as with anything, there's always challenges. First off, this is the first hackathon we put together that wasn't in person. And getting people to understand and buy into the virtual aspect was definitely a challenge. And also, historically, hackathons don't really have a restricted scope. We usually open them up to engineers to work on anything that may improve the product, not just for the customer, but maybe for the developer. But with this first hackathon, we really wanted to focus on the customer feedback, not just internally driven projects. And then here's what we hacked. We had 6 projects that our team ended up doing. We had a speaker profile section, an event search map, member connect, social sharing, faceted index navigation, and sponsored events. I'll speak about the first 3 a little more in detail as we move through the slides, but I'll speak on the next 3 a little bit here. So social sharing was an idea to help improve our social media sharing capabilities. This would allow for things like custom photo cropping, branded content, and custom call to actions or details for the event when actually sharing to different platforms. Faceted index navigation is something that will actually help increase our velocity for adding and accessing new attributes when adding filters to our pages. For right now, it takes a little more effort than we probably want for any time we want to add a new filter to a page that exists. This would actually simplify that logic for developers and make it a little easier to get these pages live with new filters and categories. And then lastly, sponsored events was an idea around how we could boost events for actual better search results. And of these 6 projects, we actually had 2 that were nearly feature complete after the demo, and we hope to get into the product here soon after some design collaboration and testing. And we'll get to those next. Those would be event search and the speaker profile section. So for the speaker profile section, this actually would allow the organizer to attach 1 or more speakers to their events instead of placing the speaker information somewhere in the description. This would actually give more visibility to who is speaking, as well as open up the door for better search results and exposure to any external resources or websites that that speaker may have. And here's actually some examples of what that might look like. that we kind of worked with the team and some designers to proof out. So there's a section that could exist directly below the image for the event, as well as over to the side where it's a little more condensed. And it just kind of gives a basic information with links to their pages. Next is Event Search Map. Event Search Map is adding a better way to find events nearby. And instead of only searching based on a topic or city or categories, you could actually use a map to locate an area that you may be near or an area that you plan to go to and see what's happening around you. And actually what we'll do next is I have a recording of what this demo looks like in use. This is one of our ones that was functioning on mobile, and we will move over to that one next. So here we can see the normal actual searching. You would just kind of scroll through a list. There's a lot going on, but what we're trying to introduce is the ability to look at a map, see all of the different meetups that are actually occurring in your area, and then you could quickly scroll through and see which ones and see where they are happening. This would actually give you the ability to zoom in. It would redefine the list, and as you zoomed in and restricted your area, it would restrict the list of meetups that you could actually see. So you can keep scrolling through. You can pick one that you want to go to because you know you're going to be in that area. You can click join RSVP, and that's it. It's just a great way to go and do searching and find events nearby. And then lastly, one of the other demos that we had was actually member connections. So the way the member connections work today, so I went to a networking event. I met Seth. We found a common interest around a niche subject, and we moved among the big group to meet others and didn't share contact information. So what do? I send him a message. Nothing happens. I don't get a response. How can we improve upon this? So one of the demos that we actually had was, what could member connections be? What if instead of relying on a direct message, you could send a connection request and not only message the member, but notify each other when you plan to attend a new event or get a notification when that user plans to attend an event. So here's sort of a flow where we add an actual connection button to the user profile. You can go and see what your actual connections are, who your connections are pending with. And then anytime you RSVP to an event, potentially, you could invite your connections. And as you invite your connections, you can see in the fourth image on the right, look, you got an invitation. Somebody is going to this event and wants you to join. And then with that, I thank you and I will pass it back to Rajib.
All right, Alex, thank you for that wonderful update on Hackathon. I think it allowed us to look at problems that we know that we want to resolve, hack away at solutions, collaborate with different folks, but at the same time, have working code demos that I think was really, really motivating to the entire company, and some of them are actually going to launch soon. We are looking at many of the things that Alex just shared. Again, we're trying to figure out how do we productize it, how do we evaluate how it makes the most sense, but very excited to see those things come to life. We're going to jump into the Q&A section, but we have one more slide here. Before we do the Q&A, just wanted to let everyone know, please make sure to subscribe at meetuppodcast.com. Keep Connected, which is with our CEO, David Siegel, and there's great sessions that he talks to in that podcast. I'm personally a big fan, so make sure you take a second to scan the QPR code and join the podcast. I'm going to count down in 10 seconds, and we will then go into the Q&A session. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate everyone joining in, and we're going to use the next 9 minutes to answer any questions that have come in. All right. Alex, you can turn that off, and we'll go into the Q&A. All right, I'll start off with one quick question, which the first one that came is, Justin, for you, what is one of the metrics that has shaped over time?
One of the metrics shaped over time, I would definitely say that it's very interesting to see how we have seen a lot of our, I'll call it like organic search results coming from Google They took a pretty big dip as part of the pandemic, as part of our own internal ecosystem and page speed. And as we began to add things like increased speed, increased schema information, we're starting to see these metrics turn around. And so that's one story we saw play out from a dip to a fixed cycle to product iteration to then it coming back up. So that's the first thing that pops into my mind.
Nice. We have one more question from Peter. Actually, we have quite a few questions. So I'll go through this and I'll rotate around. Alex or Justin, how do you measure how much faster you are than your competitors?
Yeah, I can I can answer that. So what we do is we run weekly, daily reports on our page specifically for events and home, and then we can run those exact same reports using Google Page Speed Insights for really any other website that's publicly accessible. And then we can compare our results to their results and just see how we're doing. It's actually pretty simple.
Great. The next question is from Dirk, which is, are you going to continue reducing information available through APIs and RSS feeds for standard users that we use to show event information on our website in a calendar format? An example of this is RSS and the ability to have a date and time field on it. And from a standard user point of view, how can we actually get these features more into it? So great question, Dirk. What I will say is that I will look into the RSS and missing those fields. I think those are things that we can determine how to get those in. But again, I think we want to make sure that if there's feature requests that are coming in, we find a path to do this. But Dirk, I will make sure that we look into that one for you. I'm actually need to check in with the team about those fields, but if that is something that we can easily add, we will do that. This is from Raquel, which is a question for high level. Who do you think are your competitors and who are considered peers? So I can jump into answering the competitors part, which is that actually how we compare ourselves is in folks that are in our industry and folks that are outside of our industry. So the reason is that we want to make sure that we're not just best in a few criterias, but best in class all around. So whether it's ESPN, whether it's a media site, whether it's other things, we take a gambit of companies that are similar and not similar and compare. So if you have a page with the video, if you have a page with just content, we look for similar companies that are in our space and outside of our space, because we want to make sure that we are not just fast, we're blazing fast. That's one of our models that we go for. So, but if you, like Alex, Justin, do you want to mention some of our peers, if you will, that we also use to establish our benchmarks from a performance standpoint?
Yeah, it's like if you think of Eventbrite is one that we know of course, so we could always compare our speed and product offering to what they have. So I would consider them a pretty close competitor.
Great. All right. Woof, this is a tough one, but we like the tough ones. How does knowing this tech info help your users? Whew, all right. Who's going to take that one? Look, I think it's a wonderful question. What I will say is, Meetup technology, we know needed a refresh. We know that it suffered from a lot of legacy applications or architecture. And the point of us oversharing on all of these things is to be completely transparent on how we're shaping things, how we're moving things, and how they've evolved and how we continue to make sure that it stays a focus to evolve. So we want to make sure that this information is available. We have a lot of tech organizers that are joining this as well. And we've heard feedback that getting more insights into how we're running tech and engineering becomes important. So for that mass of audiences, we want to make sure we'll continue to share these information. Great question, hard one, but we love the hard questions. Peter asked, who participates in these hackathons? Meetup employees only or your customers?
Yeah, I can take that one. So with our first iteration, and I think historically it's generally Meetup employees, and I sort of spoke to it a little bit. Usually they're tailored towards engineers specifically, but we did our best to expand it out this past iteration, mainly to get more of a user perspective and an outside non-engineering perspective by bringing in customer support, product design, and getting as many different eyes on the product as we could and different perspectives, which hopefully gives us a really good sample of the type of things that we need to fix and work on and some issues. Because most if not all Meetup employees are using the app, organizing their own events. Like we know the pain points. If we don't, we're looking at customer feedback constantly to make sure that we have a good understanding and are striving to fix those areas.
All right, thanks, Alex. This one is, what happens to the feedback vote and options form we fill out after an event? So let me just make sure I understand this question. If this is referring to after event has happened, the feedback from how was your event and all the information that comes back into it. Typically, there's a couple of different ways. We make sure that that information is leveraged in how we actually show event recommendations, personalization, and other things. They become signals that we can leverage. That's one aspect of how those things come in. I think the second question to this was like, how can we see this more? Where is that revealed and how can that come up? I'm going to follow up on that one. So Leslie, if you can in the Q&A, if you can just, I will follow up with you just to make sure that we can clarify exactly what type of thing you're looking for. And because I do believe we can show you some of those things and they are available, but I will double check on that. I think we have two more questions before we wrap up. The next one is, have you solved the problem of nearby meetups actually being across a body of water? It may be technically close, but it's across the Hudson in New Jersey. And so getting there is actually very far. Great question. Actually, similar to what Justin shared about the split testing, we actually do have some split tests currently running, which is exploring how we're using neighborhoods to actually impact ranking based on searches that are conducting that is looking at nearby events in a different way. We're planning, the split test is being run so we can capture that is actually resulting in more members joining organizer events. We're going to expand that test to large metros, get the learnings, and then we're going to start incorporating that heavily. We also believe a non-search mechanism way to help for this is to include the maps. Because it lets you look at everything near you. So there's a technical aspect and a product aspect. We're going to do both, but some of those are already underway. So if you may already be part of a split test, or you may be a part of the control, but we are actually testing some of these things out. And I know we're at time, but we're going to answer one more question. Justin, I'll give this one to you from Bill. Are you still going to support and improve the desktop? I guess, application?
Sure. The short answer is absolutely. We do have metrics. We have overall more app users, but we can't be anywhere without web users. We're all part of the same product base and community. So there's going to be full support going forward, whether it be mobile web or desktop web, in addition to our apps. There are certain features we sometimes launch in the apps first, but that doesn't mean that we don't continue to evaluate and see that things also fit on desktop and mobile web as well.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, that we are seeing our audience grow on the native app space, but that doesn't mean that we also don't have a significant amount of traffic globally coming in through the desktop experiences, even mobile web, right? Which we know is now responsive web, which you can do that plays well on desktop, tablet, and mobile. So it will always continue to be a focus, but just calling that out as well. These were great questions. I know we went a minute over, but Alex, Justin, thank you for your participation today. We had some great questions. So for everyone that joined, thank you. And we look forward to seeing you at our next session. Until then, see you later.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.